guest. He's my friend and guest, Danny Vargas. Danny has done some amazing things in his career, and to me, it seems like you're just getting started, Danny. Danny is the founder and president of VARCom Solutions. They're a government contracting firm out in Virginia, Northern Virginia. He's an Air Force veteran in the intelligence, that is, right? And Danny has done so many other things. You may have seen him on CNN and MSNBC, and he's been doing some work in op-ed work as Wall Street Journal, so many different columnists, opportunities you've had, and just been spreading your word and your news, and it's just exciting to have him here with me tonight. Thank you so much for being on the show, Danny. How are you?
Thank you, Akia. I appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. So tell us about VARCom Solutions and what's going on over there in Northern Virginia.
So I'll tell you, Akia, I've been blessed to have the many opportunities that I've had in my life. We'll talk about my background a little bit, but in terms of my company, I started VARCom Solutions back in 2004.
Yeah.
After, again, a career in the intelligence community, then a career in telecommunications. And what we were focused on is making sure that we had a small business that was able to help other small businesses as well as medium and large enterprises with their marketing, their public relations, their outreach activities, and strategic communications in general. We've since expanded to be able to do other management consulting and other services for the federal government and DoD. So we've been blessed to be able to keep our company going. We'll be in our 13th year. We'll celebrate our 13th birthday come May. So it's been just a wonderful experience to be able to start a business, understand the perspective of small business and entrepreneurship after having come from very large organizations. And it's great that it affords me the opportunity to be involved in the community as well.
Wow. So then with the government contracting versus your commercial clients, how did you make that decision in terms of dividing your portfolio and your time and business development and so forth?
So it's interesting. I came from a world where I spent 7 years active duty Air Force and then 5 years working for a government contracting company that became part of Raytheon Corporation. So I came from that government contracting background. And then in telecom, it was all commercial and private sector, large corporate activities. When I started my business, I focused exclusively on commercial clients. Many of my clients turned out to be small government contracting companies that needed help with their marketing, with their communications, their messaging, and so forth. And after a few years, I got back involved in government contracting myself. I got my 8A certification, which is a way for small and disadvantaged businesses to get a leg up in government contracting. I've got my service-disabled veteran-owned small business status certified by the Department of Veterans Affairs. So I've been able to leverage those qualifications as well as my experience to be able to get into government contracting. We've had great partners along the way, too. We established a joint venture with an engineering manufacturing company, and we've been able to help a number of our government contracting clients with their important missions.
Yes, I mean, and how are you dividing your time then? As you're the rainmaker, if you will. You're the chief executive officer. Are you involved in any of the products or
chief
projects?
Cook and bottle washer.
Yeah.
I help. I am intimately involved with all of the projects that we are involved with, both with our commercial clients as well as our government contracting clients. I think it's important. We decided when we first got into government contracting to have a sort of a foot in both worlds because we didn't want to have all of our eggs in one basket. We thought it was important to diversify our portfolio of clients as well as our portfolio of services so that if there was a downturn either in the private sector market or in the government space, that we'd have some protection, right?
Yeah.
And we saw that because after 2008, there was a dip in the economy. There was a decline in government spending for a while. So as companies that were exclusively focused in one or the other saw a hit, we had the ability to sort of migrate our focus in one or the other area.
So it sounds like you're saying more agile and able to kind of pivot, if you will. I know that's a buzzword nowadays, but you were able to pivot and you're still able to do that?
And still able to do it. I think it's important. We decided it was important for us to be able to maintain clients both in the commercial space as well as the public sector space, and then make sure that we are expanding our portfolio of services. So it's the marketing and communications activities, but we're also getting deeper involved in the management consulting and technical spaces as well.
Yeah, and it's always interesting to hear a small business owner, especially a contractor who's also got some commercial work in its portfolio, talk about that balance. And it's not always, first of all, it's not easy to do
Right.
that, and then once you do it, it's not really easy to keep it up on both sides. How have you been able to do that?
So it's not easy to start. It's not easy to maintain. But I think in our case, I came from both a government contracting background as well as a commercial background. So it was
Right.
a question of making sure that I focus my energies in both areas at the same time, and making sure that we continue those engagements on both levels. I continue to be active in the Chamber of Commerce community,
Yeah.
which keeps me involved with the private sector community, not just in the government contracting space. But I've also got a number of areas where I am engaged with government agencies.
Yeah.
So being able to, I think it's important to stay active
Yeah.
in those communities that you hope to serve, in order to make sure that you have that visibility and that prominence and that ability to understand where their pain points are. Because I think that's, at the end of the day, that's where we advise our clients with when we provide the marketing solutions
Yeah.
and recommendations. Always try to understand the pain points of your clients.
Yeah.
I think too many of my clients have spent a lot of time developing capabilities
Yeah.
and skill sets and so forth, and it's great to be able to talk about what you do, but it matters less to the people you're talking to.
Yeah.
They care less about the what, they care more about the so what,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean.
Exactly. So,
Right.
with your projects, how different does your government projects look than your commercial projects?
It's a good question.
Yeah, and I know sometimes you might have that very specific scope of work on the government side. Not that you wouldn't have
Right.
that on the commercial side as well, but I know the regulations and all sorts of things can be different from a procurement perspective.
I think part of it is, I would say it's a couple of different areas. Number one, I think the paperwork is a lot different. I think in the private sector side, you're able to sort of function a lot more quickly in terms of being able to convince executives that these are the types of services that they need. The procurement process is a lot simpler. It's a lot faster in many cases. Whereas in the government space, it's a lot more complicated. It's a longer sales cycle. The paperwork involved is a lot more substantial.
Yeah.
But it's also greater volume in many cases, right? I think the other thing you can do in the private sector space that's a little different than the government space is that in the private sector, you're able to, it's a little bit more like jazz. You're able to riff and so forth. You're able to be a bit more creative in what you do, whereas in the government space, it's a bit more regulated. It's a bit more focused in terms of what you're able to do, what you're not able to do.
Yeah.
And but it's still worthwhile. I think so many of the government clients that we look at are those agencies that do have a responsibility to engage the public.
Got it.
So that's where
that's great.
Bringing creativity is also important.
So, what tends to be the timeline on the various projects that you all go after?
So some of it is, for example, in the private sector side, we might be called in to help with strategic communications and developing messaging and preparing for crisis communications or specific outreach and opportunities. Whereas in the government contracting side, it might be a specific market or a specific project that they're needing to do. So much of it is time bound in many respects. And limited in terms of the scope.
Sure.
Whereas in the private sector, in some cases, you're able to expand the scope into areas where maybe the client didn't even realize that they needed those services or that market that they're hoping to penetrate. So I think it's important to be able to have that ability to move in different directions depending on what the needs of the client are and what the needs of the market are.
Wow. So can you just take us through what one of your actual projects looks like? Because I know
Sure.
the deliverables can be different. What exactly are you providing? Are you providing website services? Are you providing brochures or logo services?
Sure.
Or is it more on the strategic planning services where you're doing all of that or somewhere in between?
So I'll give you an example of one engagement with a small government contracting client that we had. Having come from the intelligence background that I have, I'm fairly analytical in the way I look at projects. So I'm not on the graphics creative side of the house. I bring
Got it.
people in to help with that.
Yes.
But in the analytical side, I think it's incredibly important to make sure that you spend some time up front understanding what you hope to achieve, understanding better the market that you're hoping to be able to communicate with, developing messaging that is clear, concise, and compelling, and that connects with your target audience, and that you're able to repeat it in a continual way. That's where we shine, I think, is being able to help developing that messaging. And as we do that planning to be able to address a particular marketplace, we talk about at first having to do the analysis piece, then designing and developing a plan, and then executing on that plan with measurable components that are tied back to business goals and objectives. Because public relations and marketing, just for the sake of PR and marketing, doesn't make any sense. You've got to be able to tie it back to some kind of organizational goals that hopefully are measurable and impactful. And then we go back and we evaluate as we go along and determine where we might need to make course corrections. So if we need to do website development, we're able to do that for them. If we are able to do specific public relations activities where we're out there in the marketplace representing our clients, we do that. If there's social media that's needed to be able to make sure that their message reaches particular audiences, we do all of that for them, but we do it in a way that's within the bounds of what I call an integrated marketing communications plan, where we do a bunch of the upfront work to sort of determine what we'll do, when we will do it, how we will do it, and what the impact will be. In many cases, it seems as though it's a free-for-all, but the reality is it's been planned way up front. And I think that's the best way to be able to have a more focused, more effective, and a much more efficient marketing campaign.
And then for the business development, what is the difference in timeline, your lead cycle, if you will, for working with government contractors or getting in front of government agencies, rather, and getting in front of them versus your commercial clients or whoever those decision makers may be?
You know, sometimes it's order of magnitude. Sometimes with a private sector client, a small business, we might be able to identify a need, a requirement. We'll speak with them. We'll put together a proposal for them. And within the matter of 2, 3, 4 months, we're under contract and we're getting started and actually doing work for the client. In the government space, it's a much lengthier process, which can take 12, 18 months, 2 years, or more, depending on the size and the scope of it, where they might go through a solicitation process, where they're looking for whether there are these types of companies available out there and the source is sought. They'll come to develop a request for proposal. That might take a long time to actually flesh out and develop. And then when you respond to that RFP, it might take another long while for them to decide. And a basic requirement and a much larger, all-encompassing requirement, what they call an IDIQ, that time frame might be even longer. That sales cycle can be measured in years in many cases.
And then when it comes to your core competencies and all of the other things that you all have as your key differentiators, how different does that make you in the bidding cycle from all of your other competitors out there who are vying for the same things that you're going for?
There are thousands of companies out there who are looking to do business with the federal government, and that's a beautiful thing. I think what we try to do is to make sure that we have the ability to say that we've got these sets of skills and qualifications that not that many companies in the area have. We've got the certifications to set us apart, and we've got a track record of being able to service a number of different types of clients. And then we back it up with a number of partners that we've been able to bring to the table, both large and small, and a variety of competencies and capabilities. We've sort of developed in pillars in terms of our offering to the federal government. The marketing and communication services that we traditionally offer, the management consulting services that we've developed, the IT solutions that we've been able to bring on as a result of the partnerships.
And what do those look like, the IT solutions?
You know, so we've got companies that we partner with that can do everything from cyber to web development to a whole host of technical solutions that are in demand for the federal space, and then finally engineering and manufacturing, again, through a joint venture that we created. So as we look at those 4 pillars of capabilities that we've developed, that's where we're using our business development resources to go after those agencies in the federal space that have needs for those areas. But understanding that it's a long sales cycle, it's an investment in time, and the challenges for some small businesses that are exclusively focused on the federal space, they may not have the resources to stay in the game.
Exactly. I completely agree, and that's where I was going with my next question. How do you, maintain the budget, of course, the resources and so forth, to be able to withstand that long cycle?
So we're fortunate that we have a variety of clients, and we are every day looking at new opportunities. So at the same time that you're servicing your clients, you're also looking for new opportunities, and you're bidding on opportunities that you're going after. So it's a continual process every single day. even on weekends, and there is no real time off for a small business owner, where you're keeping your clients happy. You're going after new business and identifying future opportunities. It's been an interesting process over the last 13 or so years. But I wouldn't change it for the world. It's been a fantastic experience.
And when did you get to the point, Danny, where you could just go?
Still waiting for that day.
You know, I mean, just
still waiting for that
happened?
day. No. Because and the reality is that part of it has been the fact that I've had the good fortune to be able to be involved in my community as well, and dedicate a portion of my time to being a good neighbor to my community, and finding ways to make a difference and have an impact on the people that I care about so deeply.
Well, I mean, and families and workforce development and all of those great things are some of the things that you focused on. But something really, really exciting is coming up that you're spearheading, right? And it has to do with the Museum for the Latino American. What is that all about?
Sure. So as you know, I come from a Hispanic background. My family's from Puerto Rico. And I grew up in fairly austere conditions. I grew up in a small town up north called Brooklyn.
Sure.
And grew up on welfare, but also in a predominantly Hispanic community. My mother at the time spoke very little English, maybe 10 or 12 words of English. So you know how to say hello, how are you, get the heck out of my way. But as a result of that, I also understood the pride that exists within our heritage and our culture and so forth. And I wanted to make sure that my kids understood that pride in their heritage and their culture. My wife and I are both of Puerto Rican descent. So when I had the opportunity to be appointed by Congress to a commission to study the potential creation of an American Latino museum within the Smithsonian Institution, I jumped at the opportunity. I was grateful to be able to serve with other members of this commission. There were 23 of us that came from all over the country, different political stripes, different backgrounds. So we were 23 individuals that came into a room in September of 2009. And when we completed our report to Congress and the President in May 2011, we were a family of people that were very dedicated and devoted to the notion that we need to better tell the American story, because Hispanic contributions to the United States, or what is today America, date back to before the British ever got to Jamestown in 1607. So if you look back to 1493 when the Spanish got to Puerto Rico, or 1565 when they established the settlement in St. Augustine, Florida, which is still the oldest settlement in the United States. We were here long before the British ever got to Jamestown, and we've made incredible contributions to our military, to our business community, to sports and the arts, to politics and civics. We've made great contributions that haven't been told as well as they ought to be told in our museum institutions. And then in terms of the future, we know that by the year 2050, Hispanics will make up about 30% of the population, about 106 million people. Today, we're about 17% of the population. So for us to maintain our economic vitality, for us to maintain our security in the future, the Hispanic community, particularly young people, need to feel invested and involved and engaged. And this is a way to be able to make sure that we make that happen.
Right. Do you think that'll be the beginning of something special?
I think it's a legacy project. I think it's something that hopefully, when 10, 20 years from now, I'll be able to walk in with my grandchildren in the doors of this museum and let them see the heritage that they come from, both as American citizens as well as Latinos that are proud part of the fabric of our society.
I was working for Smithsonian when they were just starting the conversations on the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And one of the conversations that was very early on in that entire process was, which story are we going to tell? How are we going to all agree that this is the story that should be told regarding people of African descent in this country? Have you all had those conversations, or are you at that phase yet?
Well, and Lonnie Bunch, who is the director of that museum, is a great man who helped us greatly in our commission's efforts. And the challenge is that, yes, all the stories need to be told. A compendium of those stories need to be shared. And it's particularly challenging when you're talking about history, art, and culture. Being able to be put on display in a single building. The answer is that you can't tell them all.
Yeah.
And you can't do it all in one structure. You do need to leverage technology, for example. You need to leverage the network of Latino museums and cultural centers that exist throughout the country. You need to be able to focus on telling a story and a theme as well. I think the African American Museum does a great job of taking you on a journey.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we hope to be able to do with the American Latino Museum is provide a better understanding of this segment of the population that is so important, not just to our history, but also to our future, and making sure that we illuminate the American story for the benefit of everyone,
Yeah.
For Latinos and non-Latinos, for Americans and those that come to visit our country to better understand who we are as a people.
Exactly. And the Latino community is so diverse. I mean, not just in geography from Central America to South America and, even Mexico, but and other parts of the world. How are you all going to get through all of that, making sure that everybody has some representation?
It ain't going to be easy.
I know.
It ain't going to be easy, but I think there's the richness of the potential content is I think what makes it such an interesting project. Whoever will be dedicated to curating that the content is going to be challenged, but I think there's so many great stories to tell, and then the diversity that exists within the Latino community is also ethnic and racial as well. In the commission, we had Latinos that were black, that were Asian, that were white, and mestizos and mulattos. We had all of it.
Yeah.
And it's great to be able to have this community that cares so deeply about this country, that cares so deeply about its heritage, and I'm looking forward to the cafeteria.
Yeah,
in this
yeah,
place.
yeah.
The food's going to be amazing.
Well, it's still got to decide from which country, though. Is that food going to?
All of them.
Yeah,
it's going to have to be a mix. It's going to have to be a food court.
Yeah.
That's going to contain lots of delicious foods.
Yeah. So wow, that's just great, and it must be a real pleasure to be associated with that project. That certainly is a legacy project, and it'll just live longer than any of us.
Right. Well, so I was a commissioner from 2009 until 2011. I then joined the board of a Friends of the National Museum of the American Latino. I am now the chairman as of a few weeks ago. And it's going to be our job, thank you very much, it's going to be our job to make sure that we get the enabling legislation passed in Congress.
Sure.
This will be our third bite of the apple. We introduced legislation in the past two Congresses, so it'll be our third time's a charm. And then we hope to be able to get the support of the president to move forward with this project. I keep telling people from Congress we need a bill, and from the White House we need a builder.
Yeah, and so, wow, that's just amazing. And from a timeline perspective, you said you're thinking 20, 25 years?
No, I think it might be. We are looking at an existing building on the National Mall. It's a historic landmark. The Arts and Industries Building is the place that we had defined as a commission as our number one target location, because it is on the National Mall. That is the last existing structure on the National Mall, and we think that ought to be our home. The challenge with that is that it is a historic landmark, and we've got to go through a lot of approvals to be able to do anything to that building. So I'm thinking maybe 10 years might be a more realistic time frame to move forward, and then all the curating that needs to take place is going to take some time as well, and then to raise the money to be able to fund the building of the museum and the curation of its content.
And as I mentioned earlier, during the opening of the show, you are a media guest, quite frequently on some of our big national and international shows. I mentioned Telemundo and Univision. What do you tend to be called upon for? Why are they wanting to have you on the show to share your expertise and in which area?
So I think I first started doing national media back in 2007. I was the national chairman of a political organization. So I was called upon to provide my thoughts and my input on politics, and that's primarily where I'm continued to called upon. I do a lot of it on Fox News Channel. I've done CNN. I do MSNBC quite a bit. I talk about my perspective, from a fairly middle-of-the-road person, that even though I was the head of a political organization, I am partisan, but I am trying. I've spent everything that I've done in politics is about moving towards solutions. I think that's where we've been missing the boat. I think in many cases, I think it's been in too many cases. It's been about winning and getting points on the board as opposed to coming up with rational solutions that have the most impact on the most people in a positive way. That's what I've been trying to focus on in my involvement in politics, is making sure that we're focused on, keeping an eye on how we can have a better impact on people's lives.
And you say your involvement in politics. I think that's rather humble. I mean, you actually ran for public office. What was that like, and how did you keep it clean?
So,
because I was watching.
I'll tell you, it's a lot different running for office
Yes.
than advising people running for office. I ran for the Virginia House of Delegates in 2015. I didn't win, wasn't God's will. I had hoped that it would be a campaign based on ideas and issues and qualifications, and it turned out to be a typical partisan thing where there are accusations being slung and so forth. So I was disappointed in that. I was hoping that we could keep it above that level. But it was great to be able to meet my neighbors. It was great to be able to knock on thousands of doors and talk to people about the things that they care about most. And every time that I spoke to one of my neighbors in my district, when I knocked on their doors and they opened the door, I said, "Hi, I'm Danny Vargas. I want to understand what's important to you."
Yeah.
And that's what I think I took away from it. It was, at the end of the day, it really ought to be about serving the people and identifying ways to be able to make a difference. My passion has always been and will always be finding ways to be able to help struggling families achieve sustainable self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
I think there is dignity in being able to fend for yourself and take care of your families and provide a better future for your kids than what you had for yourself. And I think if we can create that environment where there is opportunity, where we can provide people the skills and the tools that they need in order to succeed, and make sure that they live in an area, in a neighborhood that's safe, where they can spend time with their children and their parents and so forth. I think that's the best that we can hope for. That's what I was trying to focus on, and I will continue to focus on. I was appointed to a commission in Virginia to find ways to promote and enhance economic opportunity for those struggling families and minority communities in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I care about that deeply, and that's what I'll continue to be passionate about in the future.
Do you think you'll run again?
You never say never, but I'm not sure if it's in the cards right now. You don't necessarily have to be an elected official to make a difference and have an impact.
Change, absolutely.
So I think as long as I'm involved in the conversation, as long as I'm providing my voice to elected officials on both sides of the aisle, if they'll have me, I think that's something where I think I'll be proud to be able to do that, and I hope that humbly that they would, some of them would listen. And I tell people over and over again, I said that the poor are not the problem; they're the ones most in need of solutions.
Sure.
So I think if we can find ways to be able to make a difference and have an impact, that's what we'll focus on.
And what was it like building a campaign, building the manpower, putting people on the bench who could help you?
Well, it was a whirlwind of activity. I'll tell you, I had never thought about running for office until the incumbent in my district decided to retire, called me and asked me to run to replace him. And I said, well, I got to think about it. I've got my business, I've got my family. My family's my number one priority. So I had to make sure that it was okay with them before I did it. And then it was a process of bringing the pieces together and figuring out how I go about doing this. Never having run for office before. I can tell you, I'm not a politician. I'm a business guy. And then speaking to community organizations, speaking to neighbors, getting the endorsement of the Washington Post was a big deal for me. I thought I was incredibly humbled by that endorsement, as well as the endorsement of many other organizations, including the Northern Virginia Chamber of Commerce and others.
How did that shift your campaign with the Washington Post endorsement? How did that?
We made sure we let people know. I think it was a surprise as I was with my campaign manager driving in the car, and I was looking at my phone, and I saw a message, and I looked at him and I said, I think we just got endorsed by the Washington Post, and he slammed on the brakes. So we just took advantage to make sure that we let people know about that and continued our effort to sort of communicate a positive, issues-oriented campaign.
Yeah, wow, that's just amazing. I mean, I think you ran a very honest and respectable campaign, and I was happy to see that. I mean, just knowing you personally, I was just watching and just, I really was afraid. My husband always says that politics is a dirty game, and I just was hoping that you would just be able to maintain your image that you have built for yourself, and not see that slandered as a result of
Right.
the competition that is a part of politics.
One of the things that did it hurt me a little bit was the fact that I was in the campaign. My opposition described me as someone who couldn't get anything done. That was the
Sure.
theme. When the reality is that I've spent my entire adult life
Getting
working
stuff
hard
done, right?
to get things done, including the stuff that I don't get paid for. Right. The governor of Virginia had appointed me chairman of the workforce board for the entire Commonwealth, where I spent a lot of time and effort trying to find ways to make our workforce system more efficient and more
Sure.
effective to help people get back to work. And to help our companies find the talent that they needed to be able to move forward and grow. There are lots of ways to be able to have an impact, and that's what I've been trying to do, both in my business for my clients as well as my involvement in the community.
Wow. And then when it comes to workforce development, how are you still working in that space now? What are you focused on to continue that goodwill that you started out
Right.
as, and sort of switch gears a little bit as a
Sure.
result of the campaign?
So I completed my term as chairman of the workforce board, and I'm now working on this commission to help struggling families. And then more recently, I'm involved in an initiative in Northern Virginia called a statewide initiative called Go Virginia.
Sure.
And I'm part of the regional council for Northern Virginia to sort of determine the vision for where our local economy, our regional economy will move in the future, where we need to invest, what industries are going to be the most impactful, how we can make sure that we're putting the most people back to work in good paying jobs, helping our businesses grow and succeed. And that's going to take a lot of effort to bring together great people who have wonderful minds and great experience, and I'll be humbled to be among them to talk about some of these issues about, where are we going as a region in
Sure.
the future? Where should we make those investments? And it's going to take a group of folks that are able to roll up their sleeves, think regionally as opposed to parochially. I think that's sort of the natural tendency, is to sort of put blinders on and just think about what matters to you and your swim lane.
Sure.
It's going to take some special people who are able to sort of expand their field of view and think as a region, and then as a Commonwealth, and then as a greater DC region, frankly.
Yeah.
What makes sense for the most people? Because we know that markets don't respect lines on a map,
Yeah.
right? Markets are sort of evolving and
Sure.
naturally shifting things. So if we're able to look beyond the lines on a map, I think that's what's going to help us grow.
And how do you decide, I'm sure that you're getting approached quite frequently to do different things. How do you decide what is a priority that you're going to pursue versus something that kind of got to let go and just move on to something else?
It's a challenge. I mean, I've been blessed. The Big Guy Upstairs has put a lot of opportunities in front of me. In many cases, I just take the baseball cap and turn it backwards and run as fast, as hard as I can, straight forward, identifying things where I think, I feel, where I can have an impact and make a difference. Things that would be good for the community as well as good for myself, my family, and my business, and trying to find that intersection. There are things that I naturally will care about more. I've served on boards of nonprofit organizations where their mission just really hits home
Sure.
with me. I was on the board of Northern Virginia Family Service for 7 years.
Oh, sure.
An organization that strictly is focused on helping struggling families get on their feet and be self-sufficient. So that mission really resonated with me. And so it's those types of organizations and those types of missions that I normally tend to gravitate towards. But there are also lots of great business activities where I think if there's a way to be able to help businesses grow, particularly helping small businesses get a leg up,
Sure.
that's where I'll try to serve as well. I was the chairman of the Dulles Regional Chamber of Commerce, as well as the first Latino to chair a mainstream chamber in the history of Virginia, as far as I know. But being able to do that at a regional chamber of commerce level was also very rewarding, very gratifying, being able to develop new programs to be able to help these small businesses get better involved in the community, find new opportunities, hire more people, and become more successful.
And as those different roles that you play in life are all, there and competing for one another as, husband and father and CEO, president, and all the other great things that you're doing with board service and so forth. Are they all helping each other?
I certainly hope so. We'll see. The jury is still out. It'll
Yeah.
come back to me in a few years. My
Yeah.
my main number one job, though, my most important job is trying to be a good dad to my kids.
Yeah.
Not always great, but I try my best. I'm trying to find ways. I didn't grow up with a dad, so I'm sort of winging it.
Sure.
I just want to make sure that they understand that they are unconditionally loved, and try to provide them as good an example as I can provide them in terms of doing what you have to do business-wise, but also trying to be a good citizen at the same time. And being a good citizen is finding ways to be able to give back, whether it's coaching a little league team or, serving food at a shelter or getting involved in nonprofit organizations or finding ways to give back from a political perspective. All of these things that you're able to do to be able to give back and be a good citizen, I want to make sure that they understand that those are things that go hand in hand with whatever you're doing professionally. I think you can do good at the same time that you're doing well.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I think too many people in the business community sort of fail to sort of incorporate it into their daily lives. They're so focused on making money and becoming wealthy and becoming successful that they forget that there's something much more important to life than just material gain.
Sure.
You've got to feed the soul as well.
I mean, and I've heard you talk about your faith in this conversation. Where else are you drawing your inspiration? Are you actively reading often to to stay attuned? I mean, I have 1,000 questions for you regarding your inspiration, and not just that, but the way in which you are pursuing all these things, and wondering, for the savvy business owner, the savvy CEO,
Sure.
the savvy, president of a government contracting firm, is it all necessary?
Everybody's going to do their own thing and in their own way. And, it's up to every individual to sort of define their path. In my particular case, I know that were it not for the intervention of what I feel to be the God that I care about deeply, I would be dead or in jail right now. And I've sort of incorporated that into my daily life. I don't wear it on my sleeve, but it's something that I care about deeply, that really resonates with me and really matters to me. I think we stand our tallest when we're willing to get down on our knees. So whenever I'm presented with those things that you asked about earlier, what choice do you make? If I'm presented options, I really do close my eyes and I ask for inspiration. Say, what should I do? And trust that I've picked the right path, and leave it up to God to decide, if that's the right path for me. I struggled with it for a long time to say, why am I put in many of these positions? And I realized probably not that long ago that it's not about me. It's about being able to respond to a calling and to serve a community and to try to make a difference. So that's sort of what works for me. It's gonna be different for every individual. But putting my faith in a power greater than myself has been important to me in my life.
And regarding the Latino community specifically, how are you making sure that, and aside from the work that you're doing for the new museum, how are you making sure that the things that you are doing are impacting that community, your community?
One of the things that I did early on when I first started my business, I got involved with our local congressman, member of Congress, on Hispanic issues that were affecting the area around the Herndon-Reston area. Gangs was one of those issues that was prevalent at the time, MS-13 and so forth. And we tried to find ways to be able to engage Hispanic families in the area. Many of them didn't speak English very well. And trying to find ways where they could avoid getting involved in gangs in the first place, those kids that wanted to get out of that life, providing them a pathway out of that environment. And that was challenging at first. It was challenging to get those families involved. It was challenging to get them to show up and listen to some of these recommendations or receive their feedback. So we had to struggle to find ways to be able to reach out and engage those families. We were successful to a certain extent, but I wanted to make sure that we kept a pulse on the community. but it's not monolithic by any sense of the imagination. So at the same time, you've got families struggling with drug addiction and gang environments and violence and crime. You've also got families that are doing exceptionally well academically, that have got a pathway to success
Sure.
in the professionals field. You've got entrepreneurs that are building businesses at record numbers, at
Yeah.
numbers 3 times the national average. So I think there are a multitude of aspects to the Hispanic community where I've been trying to make sure that we are able to make a positive impact in each of those areas. Can't be all things to all people, but those things that I am involved in, I want to make sure that we're trying to have as positive impact as we can possibly have.
Can I ask you, for the Latino community in America, what is your vision for that ability to just not live only, but to thrive, to feel welcome and proud, to be able to be proud of history and legacy and where each of your community members may come from, but also be equally proud to be American and contribute to this great nation.
And and that's you bring up an excellent point. I mean, I think that's where I've wanted to make sure that I provide an example of being able to have a foot in both worlds, right? Being able to have a foot in a proud, rich Latino culture, but also an incredibly proud American who's a veteran, and I love my country. But at the same token, we are. So people talk about the melting pot.
Sure.
I don't think it's so much a melting pot. I think it's more of a stew, right? Where you've got various components of the food. You bring them all together. It's a delicious dish, but each component maintains its identity, right? So within the Hispanic community, I would love to be able to see where every young Latino kid sees themselves proud of their heritage, proud to be an American, and that the only limitation in terms of what they're able to achieve is the limits of their imagination and their hard work. And that's the dream that I see, not just for every young Latino, but every young American. To not be limited by their family background, not be limited by the zip code in which they were born, not be limited by any social constraints that they might see placed upon them, but their only limitation is the limit of their imagination and what they can strive for. As someone that I grew up on welfare, as someone who came from that austere background, maybe it was my own ignorance that I didn't know what the limitations ought to be for me.
Sure.
That I just kept moving forward.
You didn't see them.
So I wasn't aware of them, so I didn't let them keep me back. So that American dream, where only in America can someone like myself, coming from a background where my mom didn't speak English, was not able to read or write, but in one generation have someone that was able to run for office, start a business, have an impact in the community. That can only happen in America, and I want every young person, Latino, African American, Asian, white, all of them to feel that sense of opportunity.
Yes.
Where the sky is the limit, that sense of awe.
Yeah.
That they can achieve anything that they set their mind to. I want every young person to have that sense.
That's awesome. And then when it comes to Spanish language being everywhere, we're pretty much a bilingual country now. I mean, at least I like to think so. Does that feel like a win for the Latino community?
I think it's a win for America. Frankly, I think it's great that we're able to develop language skills. I mean, I think most of the rest of the world is able to speak at least 2 languages. I think it's to our detriment that we don't embrace the ability to speak in other languages. Which I think it's great that we have language now as a requirement in public schools. So whether it's Spanish, French, German, Chinese, Japanese, or what have you, I think it's great to be able to have young people learning different languages. In my case, in the case of Spanish, I grew up speaking both languages sort of at the same time. I have to translate for my mother when I was 5 years old. So it's a skill that I grew up with. We've got a market in Latin America that's burgeoning, right? That I think within the next 5 or 10 years is going to be increasing and growing, and that we ought to be prepared to capitalize on. And the more that we're able to have our business people learn Spanish and Portuguese, in the case of the Western Hemisphere, that's even better for our business community. At the same time that they're able to learn Japanese and Chinese and other languages for Asia, as well as languages that would matter in Europe and Middle East and Africa. I think it's to our benefit to have folks that have language skills.
Are you able to help any clients in that space?
Absolutely.
Great.
No, I think we've done work in the healthcare community, in the utilities community, in the government sector, and where Spanish has been helpful. And the fact that I've been able to do media in both English and Spanish has been helpful as well. For the State Department has sent me overseas on missions to talk about our political process and our campaigns and our candidates and our issues to countries in Latin America and Spain, where I'm able to do that in Spanish.
Yeah, and within the African American community, constantly on display issues in the African American community, what African Americans need to do and should be doing. And we have those internal dialogues, amongst ourselves. And we talk about our priorities and things that, are really focal and need to be, solved so that we can all move forward in the ways in which we were created to do so. What about those priorities that are, being talked about in the Latino community? Not so much as government, saying, well, we're going to, offer this assistance, or there's workforce development programs that need to happen and so forth and so on. But in the Latino community, what are those discussions that are taking place?
It's interesting. And people talk about, what are the Latino issues?
Yeah.
But I think many of the Latino issues are American issues. It's just the same issues that any other family is grappling with. Those kitchen table issues about where's the next job that I'm going after? Have I got the right education? Do I have the right skills? What am I going to do for healthcare? And so forth. Is my community safe? And so forth. I think one of the areas where I think it's more relevant to Latinos in many respects than others is the immigration issue. I've been an advocate of comprehensive immigration reform, whether it takes place as one large issue or as components that are sequential.
Sure.
Is up to the legislators to decide, but I think it's important to recognize that there are a lot of families that are working hard to contribute to our economy. They're in an undocumented status, and that's not right. It's wrong that they came here, but at the same time, we know that for many years, for 30 years, there have been two signs on the border. One says keep out, the other one says we're hiring. So we are where we are because we haven't enforced laws, because we haven't updated our immigration system, because we haven't, done the things that we need to do to have a system that works for our economy and our security. So I think it's up to us to be able to fix it, and at the same time find a compassionate way to deal with folks that are in an undocumented status. We need to have borders. We need to have laws. We need to have security. All that has to be done in a way that's sensible and compassionate. I think we can achieve both if we're willing to work together and come up with those solutions.
Right. I would imagine that the emotions are pretty high right now.
Pretty high right now. I think cooler heads will prevail. I think at some point and say, look, we've everybody's to blame for where we are right now. The businesses that have attracted workers, the workers that came in or overstayed their visas, the Congress for not fixing our system, the executive branch of both parties that haven't enforced our laws. So once we come to grips with the fact that everybody's to blame, then we will realize that everybody's going to have to come up with a solution.
Right, and back to VARCom Solutions and the great work that you're doing through your company. What are your priorities, and how often are you doing your strategic planning and business planning and so forth? So
we've got, fortunately, we brought on some additional business development resources. We are constantly looking at our strategic plan, making sure that we are making course corrections as needed, making adjustments as needed. I think we're finding ways to be able to expand on the commercial side, which is great.
Sure.
But then at the same time, penetrating new agencies within our government contracting space. So those business development resources that we've brought on board are folks that are very experienced in the contracting space that are able to help bring in both partners as well as identifying opportunities that we will go after directly. I think our sights are set in the future.
Sure.
We look to continue to grow this year as well as next year, and then sort of position ourselves for life after 8A.
Yeah.
The 8A program only lasts a certain number of years.
Yep.
So we've got to be able to find ways to make sure that we are competing effectively in a full and open space, and continuing to to serve our clients well and maintain a broad portfolio of services.
Awesome. Danny, thank you so much
Thank you, Akia.
for joining me.
It's been such a pleasure. It's great to be able to see you.
Absolutely. What's your URL online?
So we're at VARCom.com, and you can follow us on our website, on Facebook, and on Twitter.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed today's show with Danny Vargas. You can find him online. He's already given his URL. We'll put it up on the screen as well. Be sure to head over to AkiaGarnett.com. You'll find the recording of this show if you're just joining us and we're heading out of here. You can also connect with me on social media. I'm at Akia Garnett. Make sure we're connected. You'll be able to keep up with all kinds of marketing tips and branding tips that will help you build the image and the brand that you so deserve. Again, thank you for joining us. See you next time.